بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Before we start the topic, we are going to be talking about the world of the unseen. I think being near the night of Halloween, I think some of you know what is going to be discussed tonight. We're going to talk about our friends who come to the masjid here and pray with us without us seeing them. I hope you know that. Every time you say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, that's salam to all the men, all the women on your right hand side, and all the jinns as well. MashaAllah. Yeah? It's a true belief. It's a belief that is within our fiqh books. But before we continue, I'd like to say, if you have any young children, if you have anyone who's young, and or somebody who might be weak-hearted, someone might be weak-hearted, someone who might find it disturbing to hear things about jinns, then please go home and go to sleep. Because I've done this time and again. And sometimes I've had youngsters, they're about, doesn't matter what age they are, they all want to know about this. They all want to know about this. And when you ask them, are you going to be scared? They go, no, never, no, it's all right. And next minute, next day, their moms are sending letters to the school saying, my kid's basically scared, he won't go to sleep, on time. And there was one particular family talking about jinns. There's a whole family that were, it was a social kind of event. Talked about it, there's some youngsters there. And there's some there that weren't very young, they were teenagers. And after they finished, there was one particular family member who wouldn't go to toilet on their own, I'm not being serious, they would ask the mom to stand outside the toilet door before, and they'd be probably like, I'm all right inside, haven't dropped dead yet. So please, if there's anyone, I'm being serious here, if there's anyone, and don't blame me afterwards if, they don't bring complaints to the masjid or something. We had an event and we had someone, who came and scared someone. There was one particular person, I remember once, they used to wake up the family for Fajr. And after they heard some of the jinn stories, I told them they didn't get up for Fajr after that. They were waiting for others to wake them up for Fajr. And they were hoping it wasn't a jinn. But anyway, the world of the unseen. In the unseen, and the unseen we only know through the Quran and the Sunnah. No person can know the unseen in its entirety except through the Quran and Sunnah. And we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has been very merciful to us, to tell us what is happening in the unseen. Firstly, and most importantly, in the world of the unseen, there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the biggest belief that we have. And it overrides everything else in the unseen world and in the seen world. It's a very important part I'm saying to begin this talk. Because some people, they start to think about certain unseen creatures, and because of the belief is weak in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their belief in these unseen creatures becomes greater. That's where a big clash and a big problem comes. Our belief ultimately is Allah is Qadir, which means He has power over everything. Our belief is Allah is Ghalib, which means He has His dominance over everything. Our belief is that Allah is the Mumit, Allah is the Muhi, Allah is the one who causes death, and Allah is the one who gives life. Our belief is Allah is the one who gives power to others to do anything besides Allah that has got power. It's only through the power of Allah. It is only through the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And no one else has got any power, and they will never gain any power without Allah's power. Now the Christian belief, or some of the other sort of religious beliefs, are specifically in the Christian sort of world, that evil and good have got equal powers, or almost equal powers. And that evil and good are fighting, and eventually they believe that good will override evil. But they believe that evil has got a great amount of power. We don't believe in that. We believe evil is a creation of God. So it's something that God created. It's completely 100% within His power. Nothing of evil, nothing of jinn, iblis, sihr, whether you want to say it's black magic or anything else in this world, can have any effect except through the will of Allah. And it's very clear in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah talks about sihr itself. If you look at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, and you will find the chapter about Suleiman alayhi salam, and you will find there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about the whole chapter about how sihr sort of was there in the world. You will find that Allah says, وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. This is in Surah number 2, verse number 103. That they cannot cause any harm by their sihr or their magic to anyone except through the permission of Allah. Which means that when Allah allows these things to continue, they will continue. Not that Allah is, it's basically like, have I got the idhn of Allah or the permission of Allah for me to move? Yes, I have. I can move. But when Allah, the idhn or permission won't be there, my hand will not move. It will be still. The same way does physics works in this world? Well, yes, it does. You can get a ball, you can roll it down a hill. It will roll. But if Allah wants to, the ball will just stop. It won't roll. What does fire do? Well, it burns. And that's Allah's idhn in every fire that will burn. But Allah takes that idhn away when? When Ibrahim was in the fire, He took that idhn away. He took that permission away. So the fire, did it burn Ibrahim alayhi salam? No, it didn't. A knife, it will cut. And it will cut. A sharp knife every time will cut. But did it cut what? The throat of Ismail alayhi salam? No, it didn't. Because the idhn of Allah was removed at that time. He didn't give permission for the knife to cut. And thus, Allah's idhn and permission is needed in all of His creation for His creation to continue doing what they want to do. And no one can move out of the permission of Allah. If Allah wants a sihr or something to work, basically every sihr, every black magic will just continue at its normal pace. Except that if Allah intervenes or His idhn is there or something else that He has created comes in between, then it won't have its effect. So our primary belief is that Allah is behind everything. And nothing, absolutely nothing can overcome Allah. Absolutely nothing. And we must stick very firmly to this belief because it's central to a lot of these problems that people have, whether it's with jinns or sihr or something else. They have a problem. Mainly the problem is not with anything else but their own self. It's their belief. Their belief is weak. Now, in this whole thing as well, there's also the will of man. The will of a human being. My own human will power is going to have an effect on how I confront the unseen world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said this in Hadith Qudsi in Bukhari. In Sahih al-Bukhari, it is there. Ana inda dhanni abdi bi. Ana inda dhanni abdi bi. I am according to how my servant thinks me to be. It's a very interesting hadith because Allah uses the word dhan. So we've got a thought about Allah, how Allah might basically treat me. Now if I make my willpower and if I make my thoughts to believe that bi-idhnillah, with Allah's permission, nothing's going to affect me, then nothing will affect me. Because I have put my trust in Allah, that I believe Allah will deal with me in a manner that when I go to this place or wherever I am, nothing's going to affect me, then nothing will affect me. But if I have my thought about Allah that, I don't know, maybe, I don't know what's going to happen, maybe it might affect me, maybe I don't know what I'm going to see, maybe Allah, might not do this for me, or might do this, might not do that. If you have that kind of thought, then that is what is going to happen to you. The willpower of man, and specifically his belief towards Allah. Now we know Allah is not weak. Allah is Al-Qawi. He is ultimately strong, meaning that there's nothing that can overpower him, and there's nothing that comes in his way as weak. However, men's or women's beliefs can become weak. The weakness is where? The weakness is not in Allah. The weakness is in the human being. The same as the Quran. People do Ruqya, people read the Quran, people use it for protection, people use Ayatul Kursi, and we'll discuss this inshallah in today's reminder. The weakness has never ever been in the Quran, never. People question it, subhanAllah, people even question that. They say, how comes in the Sahaba time, like if you look in the time of the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, they, according to a hadith of Bukhari, there was 30 different companions passing by a village, and there was a person that was bitten by a snake, and they said, Hal minkum min raqin, is there anyone that can cure someone from snake poison? So the Sahaba said, okay, if we do this, what will you give us? So they said, okay, we will give you, they agreed to 30 goats, I think it was. And then they said, okay, one of the Sahabis straightforward, he went up to the person and he just read Surah Fatiha. He didn't go and get a book, hocus pocus, waving a magic wand, or he just read Surah Fatiha. And he blew onto this individual's leg, and then the poison was basically out of the body. And the person was completely cured just through Surah Fatiha. That Fatiha at that time was used. Have you come across anyone who can just sit there and go around to patients who are being struck by a snake and just read Surah Fatiha? Hey man, you should be better by now. The guy's screaming, ah! Why? Is it the Quran? The question is not with the Quran. The question is with the reader. And I'm telling you today, there are people in the world, that just through Surah Fatiha, they can cure, just like, and it's not they cure. I mean, obviously there are sabab, there are means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring that cure about just through Surah Fatiha. And there are people still alive in this world today, but they're very rare. Most of us would probably need a lot more to read than that, just to get that cure to come about. The cure, we don't bring the cure, obviously Allah brings the cure, it's His words of the Holy Quran. But the one thing that I want us to understand is that the Quran in no way is any lesser in degree of power than what it was in its time of revelation. It's actually exactly the same power. But the power of the Quran, when it comes to Ruqya, when you want to blow onto someone because they are affected by something, the power of the Quran is contingent upon the nature of the body that reads it. See, the body that reads it, it depends on the a'mal and the good action that the body does, and the purity of the heart. The more pure the heart is, the more grounded the beliefs of the Quran Sunnah are, the greater the actions are being performed by that body, the limbs of that body, the tongue of that body, the eyes of that body. The more that the eyes of that body have stayed away from obscenity, from evil looking, the more the ears have stayed away from haram, and the tongue has stayed away from lying and ghiba and haram, the greater the effect of that will be, of that reading will be when they read. And just to give you that incident, there was one person who related this to me himself. I even met his father, who also confirmed this. So I'm not giving you some story, because one thing that happens with these things is that you could start a story off right now, and by tomorrow I tell you it'll be better than the news of the world. I tell you. You can start a little story here, you can just say, I went to the wudu area and I basically, I saw something move. Yeah? Just tell that to someone, yeah? The next guy will start, it's Chinese whispers, yeah? The next guy also, you know what? He went to the wudu area and he saw something move right by his side. He saw a shadow. He's going to use, and the next guy will say, you know, he went to someone in this mosque, he went to the wudu area, they saw a shadow moving right in front of him. You know, wow. And the story will get better. It'll just get better. Each one that takes you to another one. So the best thing to do in a lot of these things is to actually go and see the person themselves who have been through some cases. So I will try to tell you some cases that I've seen myself or heard myself directly. So this is one of the cases. There was a individual who is a typical scenario, you know, young teenager, Bengali house, yeah, about 17 years old, not listening to his dad, doing whatever he wants. Yeah, dad gets fed up, says, take you to Bangladesh to get you married. Yeah, so he doesn't tell him, he tells him we're going on a holiday. So he's typical, you know, takes him on a holiday, takes him over there. Next minute he knows his passport's not there. Then he says, where's my passport? He says, you must get married, son, otherwise you see no passport. So he looks at his dad in the face and says, no passport, no marriage? So no passport, no marriage, son. So okay. He says, okay, let's see the brides. But in his head, what he wanted to do is he wanted to basically mess around with his dad. So his dad brings nice bride, you know, spends all this mishti and all these, you know, whatever, laddu, baddu, right? And buys all these clothes and takes it, and they see this bride and he says, has all the food, the guy has all the food and says, okay, where is she? Yeah, she's here. Nah, I can't get married to her, no. No, that's it. So dad thinks, wow, what happened there? So dad goes to the next one, dad goes to the next one, yeah? And in between that, what happened is, I think the father said to some poor peasant over there that, you know, they were just having a joke. And he said to the peasant that, you know, it would be nice to have your daughter for my son. He was only joking. And the peasant, being a peasant, thought, you know, all he could see in his eyes is dollars or pound signs. London. So what he did is, he was serious and he started to talk seriously. And the father said, no, I wasn't joking, man. And the guy then, you know, to get this person as a son-in-law, what he did, he casted a spell. He did sihr. He got some Hindus or whatever to do sihr. Now, it became very complicated because I think there was another person who did sihr, and this person then became messed up, where this person was acting mad and, you know, breaking things and sometimes snapping out and being blacked out and all sorts of things, okay, that this person was going through. And this person went through, they say, is confirmed by the person himself and the father as well, that they saw about 57 brides. But none of them he would get married to, because it's a sihr that is possibly making him feel in one way, right? And they've been to so many people to try and break this sihr, to break this black magic. They've been to many people to try and break it. And it just wasn't happening. Now, so many people started with, you know, number of different things that they used, until finally they went to one sheikh in Sylhet. He's not alive now, but in a madrasa called Renga Madrasa, which is in Sylhet. They went, and there was a sheikh sahib there. They went to him, and the sheikh said, bring your son here. So he brought his son. And the sheikh looked at him and he said, okay. He said, bring some water. So he brought some water. And the sheikh took the glass of water, read Surah Fatiha, blew inside and said, give it to your son to drink. The son drank it. The next bride this person saw got married. And also the guy was cured from all his blackouts and all these other things and, you know, acting wild, breaking things, whatever. He was cured from that. It was just that one Fatiha that this sheikh. Now the thing is, again, what I'm trying to say from this incident is that it's not about the Quran. The Quran is the Quran. There is no devaluing with the Quran at all. And I believe should be absolutely 100% with the Quran. 100% with Allah, 100% with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 100% with the Quran. There is nothing that should go short from this. The only thing that goes short is myself. And we've got a few things in ourselves that can go short. One is the willpower that I said. Another one is our actual belief. You know, belief is something that the stronger you put your mind to the belief, the greater the result that you will get. That is in the belief. The belief, there are some people, they've just got the belief, it will just happen. You know, from this hadith I'm saying, Ana inda dhanni abdi bi. I am according to how my servant thinks me to be. There are some people whose belief in Allah is that it will happen. And Allah makes it happen. There's a hadith in Muslim. There's a hadith in Muslim that says, لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّهُ. There are certain servants of Allah that if they said, Wallahi, this will happen, Allah says that I will fulfill it for them. Allah's Messenger says they will not give any compensation. Allah will fulfill their oath. Whatever they will say, Wallahi, this will happen, and Allah will make it happen. So there are these people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted that they are this. And this is to do with belief. The stronger the belief, the better it is. And the other thing is the heart. There are some people who are just weak-hearted. So they just get, they're just not strong-hearted. There are others who are really courageous. Now what I want to say to you is that with regards to the unseen world and jinns and sihr or black magic, whatever it is, there are the people that get affected first are of some kind. Number one, they might be the weak-hearted, or the one with the weak willpower, the one with the weak aqidah. Number two, the one with the weak actions of the deen. So somebody who's not practicing the deen. Someone who's not practicing the deen and they're away from the deen, they are susceptible to be affected. They can be affected. But mostly from those people who are not practicing, the people who stay in impurity. This is another important aspect I'm saying. People who stay in impurity. So a person sleeps with his wife, or na'udhu billah, sleeps with a woman he's not supposed to sleep with, and they basically are in a state of janaba. They're supposed to have a ritual bath and cleanse their whole body through having a proper bath, and they don't do that. Now they are asking, shayateen, come, be with me. Okay? Now shaitan, wherever you are, come, be with me. Because shaitan has no reason to be away from them. You can read Quran at that time, your Quran is not going to be accepted. Women on their menses, it's an impure state, and they should basically, it's not just because they're on the menses. If they're praying before their menses, if they're always praying after their menses, if they are observing the hijab that normally are practicing women, that doesn't matter. But a woman who doesn't practice, and then a woman who's on her menses, she's basically now in some form of weakness. She's now prone to I'm not saying she's going to get attacked straight away. Please don't get the message wrong, all right? But I'm saying that she is weak. Now there's weaknesses. Now the weaker you become, the stronger you see your opponent, and the more you basically can be prone to some kind of attack. In terms of najasa or impurity, there is keeping the fingernails long and having a lot of dirt underneath it, to not clean the unwanted hair off the body, around the private parts, under the armpits, not doing that, for more than 40 days. Person becomes prone to that. A person who doesn't really live with cleanliness like a Muslim should, they're basically showing weakness. Now, we're not saying something's going to attack them, but it's almost like your immune system. If winter's arriving, a lot of you, I'm seeing you'll have cardigans, you'll have something thick, to wear. Unless, of course, you're a hot person. Some people, they're hot anyway. Some people, I've seen them. I saw the other day, I was freezing, and there's a guy who's, he's a little white boy. He's basically got his whole body uncovered. From the waist down he's covered with trousers, but the whole body is uncovered. He's in 11 degrees, and he's got a bike, and he's basically just biking down, and I think, well, Allah's created some people like that. They don't feel the cold. There's others who will feel the cold really easily. Now the same thing with the unseen world and some of the, ghoulies that are out there. Your weakness is key to what actually happens. Weakness of belief or weakness of, whatever. It's an immune system. We've all got an immune system. Now, to boost your immune system, what do you do in the normal world? Because this is how literally you've got to see it. if you're basically catching a cold, if you're catching a cold, you've got to boost your immune system. Now, naturally, if you eat properly, if you rest properly, your immune system is going to be high. But if you're not doing that, if you're not eating properly, if you're not sleeping properly, immune system is weak. And then you go out, you know, without protecting yourself properly, and the cold catches you, then you get a flu, all right? Or you catch a cold. Now, it doesn't matter, it's not the end of the world. You catch a cold, and then what happens after that? Well, you know, if you're a young man, you can just sweat it off. If you're a young man, you can sweat it off. You don't have to bother too much. If you're a little bit older, maybe, you know, a few lemon sips, whatever, you know, get some ginger, whatever, lemon, this and that, paracetamol, no. A few mornings, whatever, then you sort of, you know, burn it off. But if you're you've got a weak body, or you're old, then you might be looking at some serious sort of 2 weeks in bed, 3 weeks in bed, you know, just for a simple cold or a simple flu, and you can't shake it off, or you're having difficulty shaking off. Why is that? It's all to do with the different strengths that are playing with one another. Now, with this thing about yourself, myself, and the unseen world, and what the creatures that Allah has created in the unseen world, firstly, you know, there's not going to be, I don't want everyone to think that out there, you know, my God, I better, oh my God, I've got long nails, quickly cut them. I don't want you to start thinking, like that straight away. But what I want to say to you is that it's a case of two different strengths. Two different strengths. If your immune system is high, and the kind of cold that you've caught the cold that you've got is low, then it's really not going to have much effect. But if your immune system is low, and the type of thing that you've caught is high, right, it's going to affect you. Now, you could have a strong immune system, but you might get something which is really tough. It's not a cold. It might be some kind of real serious illness. It might be TB. Now, if someone's got a good, strong immune system, but you get TB, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you. And you're going to have to do something strong to shake that off. Yes or no, brothers? Yep, you're going to have to stay in hospital, you're going to have to take several tablets throughout the whole of the year, and you're going to have to shake it off. Now, look at the seriousness of TB. It's not a small case. It's a serious disease that people can die with. So now you can understand, from this world of jinns and sihr and so on, there is a strength within themselves. There's weak jinns, there's strong jinns. There's weak black magic, there's strong black magic. There's weak things out there, there's strong things out there. And it depends on what's coming in contact. Now, the number one rule is that jinns, or the whatever Allah has created in terms of the world of jinns, they're not supposed to cross over into our world. That's one rule Allah has given them. And it's in the Quran. It's in the Quran where Allah will question them. Allah will question them on the Day of Judgment, to the jinns, those of them that have crossed that barrier. They're not supposed to cross that barrier. So if you look in Surah number 6, verse number 1 to 8, you will find Allah will say, Ya ma'shar al-jinni qad istakthartum min al-ins. O population of jinns, you have become much more than the population of the humankind. And this is just one part of the Quran. You will find another one in the 23rd juz, where Allah talks about their interference with mankind. In Surah As-Safat, Innakum ta'tunana anil yamin. You used to come from the right hand side. This is 28, verse number 28, Surah Safat. In Surah Baqarah, Allah talks about massu shaytan. What the actual shaitan could do is that he can start he can start influencing or having an effect on the human being. And that has been explained in Surah Baqarah, verse number 275. يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ مِنَ الْمَسِّ. How shaitan sort of influences the mind of the human being, and they can basically take over the mind. Now, number one rule is that they're not supposed to cross that barrier. Number two is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has created them, He has given them the Quran as a guidance. And we know that from many parts of the Holy Quran where Allah even addresses them. In Surah Al-Rahman, Allah has said, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Which one of your Lord's or your sustainers' gifts are you denying? And He addresses two people by it. One or two beings by it. One is the human beings and one is the jinns. Allah addresses that. So we know that the Quran has come from them. There is also Surah Al-Jinn, where we have a whole background of how the jinns came and met with the Prophet ﷺ. Now, the jinns, let me just quickly talk about jinns, and then we'll come across them sort of crossing that barrier, or us crossing that barrier or something. We'll talk about it. Let's just talk about the nature of jinns. The word jinn in Arabic comes from a root word, jim nun nun, which means something that is hidden. So anything that will have jim nun nun will be to do with a hidden element. So you've got, for example, Jannah. Jannah is hidden from the eye. No eye has seen Jannah. That's why it's called Jannah. It's got jim nun nun there. You got Junoon, which is madness. Now when a person is mad, you don't see their madness. So it's hidden within their own mind. So therefore it's got, again, jim nun nun within that. And anything that has that, you will find that it has that element of hiddenness in it. Now, Allah has given many different ayats regarding that hiddenness. And in one of them, in Surah Al-A'raf, which is the 7th surah of the Holy Quran, verse number 27, Allah said, إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ وَقَبِيلُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُ. They see you in a way that you do not see them. So what Allah has given as a set rule is that we're both going to exist in this world, coexist in this world, but they're going to be able to see us and themselves, but we don't see them. Now the jinns, though they see us, they don't see the angels. Jinns don't see the angels, and they don't see the angelic world. The angelic world has been created from light. The jinns have been created from fire. And again, there are several ayats in the Quran to talk about the fact that they've been created from fire. Our essence comes from clay, from water, and from other elements. We've got a heavy material side to us. They've got a very light side to them. The essence is that they are, since they are of fire, fire rises. Okay, or heat rises. So jinns, and them being sort of non-tangible, they're able to fly, they're able to move around much more easily than ourselves. Now one particular incident is in Surah Naml, where Suleiman alayhi salam, he asks who is going to bring the arsh, or the throne of Bilqis. So there's an interesting part there, because there's two different beings that stand up. One is the actual jinn, and one is the one who has been given the knowledge. And they say, according to tafasir, they say that the one who's been given knowledge, some have said that is Jibreel, but others have said that it's actually another jinn that is stronger than this one. So if you look in Surah number 27, verse number 39 and 40, you will find قَالَ عِفْرِيتٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ. And Ifrit, Allah has given that name from the jinns, said, I will bring it to you, I will bring Bilqis. Now Bilqis again is controlling a whole world of jinns, and she's a jinn herself. And he says, I will bring you her throne to you, and قَبْلَ أَن تَقُومَ مِن مَقَامِكَ, before you can even stand up in your place. وَإِنِّي عَلَيْهِ لَقَوِيٌّ أَمِينٌ. I'm strong, and I'm also, I've got trust. And then the one who had the knowledge of the book said, he stood up and said, أَنَا آتِيكَ بِهِ قَبْلَ أَن يَرْتَدَّ إِلَيْكَ طَرْفُكَ. I can bring it to you before you can blink your next eye. And before he blinked, he saw the throne of Bilqis in front of him. And that was the power. Now, they can move, some of them. Now again, it's to do with the power that Allah has given, because some of them are weaker than others. Some of them are weaker than others. So some of them can't move so fast, but some of them, but others can actually move fast. Some of them are more powerful than others. It's very clear from this part of the tafsir of the Quran that there is a strength amongst them, that whether some of them have more power than others. Now, interestingly, Suleiman alayhi salam, he was given the power over jinns. He was the only human being that had the authority given by Allah to control jinns. And Allah has given reference in the Holy Quran about that in Surah Al-Naml again, where Allah says, وَحُشِرَ لِسُلَيْمَانَ جُنُودُهُ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ وَالطَّيْرِ فَهُمْ يُوزَعُونَ Surah Al-Naml, verse number 17 of Surah 27. That for Suleiman, the jinns were gathered, the men were gathered, and the birds were also gathered. This is specifically his power that Allah had given him, that he could have that influence on them. And what he would do is that he would ask them to build monuments for him. And if they didn't build monuments for him, he would cage them up. And he would also ask them to dive into the oceans and bring out for him certain precious stones out from the depths of the ocean. So some of them he had them building, some of them he had them in cages, and some of them he had them diving into the oceans. And this is in the Quran, in Surah Sad, 38th Surah. Allah says, فَسَخَّرْنَا لَهُ الرِّيحِ I gave Suleiman the power of the winds. تَجْرِي بِأَمْرِهِ رُخَاءً حَيْثُ أَصَابَ Gently it will be able to take him wherever he wanted, and wherever it would reach to. وَالشَّيَاطِينَ كُلَّ بَنَّاءٍ وَغَوَّاسٍ Allah has created certain shayateen or devils that Allah says they were masons for him, so they used to build. Ghawwas, they used to dive well into the oceans. آخَرِينَ مُقَرَّرِينَ فِي الْأَصْفَادِ There were others whom he had chained up because they wouldn't listen to him. So he had that power. And they used to work very tirelessly for him. Very tirelessly for him, because Allah had given him the power over the jinns. He could order any jinn at any moment to be in front of him, and he could send other jinns to go and capture them and bring them to him. And they were working tirelessly. And there's one interesting part that I want to quote here, because it relates to some people's belief regarding the jinns. In Surah Saba, which is the 34th Surah of the Quran, verse number 14, Allah says, فَلَمَّا قَضَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ الْمَوْتِ مَا دَلَّهُمْ عَلَى مَوْتِهِ إِلَّا دَابَّةُ الْأَرْضِ تَأْكُلُ مِنْ سَأَتَهُ Now the jinns were working for him. They were making many things for him. They were making monuments for him. They were making even large pots for him. They were making features and architectural pieces for him. This is all in verse number 13 that Suleiman alayhi salam was making through the jinns. And then what happened is that he had a glass chamber, and he was standing in the glass chamber with a stick that he was resting upon with his chin. And the jinns, what he was doing is he was standing in qiyam. He was standing in sort of prayer or salah and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he actually died. Suleiman alayhi salam's death is actually while he's standing with that stick under his chin. He's resting with that stick, just resting under his chin. And he actually died in that position. But the jinns were still tirelessly working around him, because they knew that Suleiman, though he's praying in there, he could just open his eyes, and if he saw them not working, they'll be chained up. So they're working tirelessly. And they say that they were working, according to tafasir, they say that it took 6 months for a small insect to bite through that stick that Suleiman a.s. was resting, until finally the stick snapped and Suleiman a.s. fell down. And the Quran says, فَلَمَّا خَرَّ When he fell down, تَبَيَّنَتِ الْجِنِّ The jinns now realized, أَلَّوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ الْغَيْبَ مَا لَبِثُوا فِي الْعَذَابِ الْمُهِينِ If they knew the world of the unseen, they wouldn't have remained in this punishful state that Suleiman a.s. had put them in. They wouldn't have remained in that clear punishment. Now, or that disgraceful punishment. Now that is very clear here that jinns don't know the unseen world. Now there are people who will try and capture jinns, or to try and see if they can talk to a jinn who's trapped in a human being and see if they can get to know the unseen world. It's haram. Why? Because the jinns don't know the unseen world. And if a jinn is telling you about the unseen world, then he's giving you Google-a-doo. He's giving you stories, jackanories. Right? And what happened is that the jinns used to, from a very old time, because they've been here before us. They've been here before us. And they were here when the jinns were residing on the earth and there was no humans on the earth. Adam alayhi salam got created after the creation of jinns. Jinns had a lot of bloodshed, because don't forget, please, they are a nation, or they are a group of beings Allah has created. They have everything similar to us. Everything similar to us. They eat, they sleep, they have homes, okay? They have conversations with one another, just like we have. They have language amongst themselves. They have castes. They have religions. They have bartering, things that they barter with and they trade with. They have challenges with one another. They have troubles and they have arguments with one another. They could have fights and wars with one another. And when it gets to fighting with jinn and jinn, it can become very serious sometimes. In fact, it's ended up a lot of the times before Adam alayhi salam came to this earth, he ended up in death. Death of jinns. Death of jinns. And in fact, when the messenger used to come amongst them from the jinns, this is all in Tafsir ibn Kathir, if you want to actually read up on it, about the jinns. If you want to look at the first tafsir of Surah Baqarah, where Adam alayhi salam mentioned, you will find a lot of this. And you will find in other tafsir as well. They were on this earth and they were causing a lot of mischief on the earth. And when a messenger would come, they would kill that messenger. And that is when Iblis, at that time, he was a jinn. He was part of their world. And he, ascended high enough that he became part of the world of angels because of his good nature. He was a good being. And he started to worship Allah till he got through to the ranks of the angels, some of the highest angels. And he being a jinn, he wasn't an angel, he being a jinn, living amongst the ranks of the angels. In fact, there are certain weak hadiths to say that he even worshipped Allah on every single sky, every single heaven he worshipped Allah. And he got to so close that he then asked Allah to send with him a group of angels to go back to the earth and to banish these jinns and to kill as many as he could to try and curb the violence on the earth. So Allah allowed that, and he came, he did that, and the jinns were now only a few in scarce places of the world. And that's when he came back up, Allah knew his intentions, because Iblis was looking for his own little, a high rank. And he wanted to become, Mr. Chief, or Mr. Chairman. People fight to get the chair, right? Guys, you're not listening, yeah? People fight to get the chair. To get a chair, they fight. To get in leadership, they fight. To get in charge of a place, they fight. To get in charge of any country, they fight. So Iblis was after this. And Allah knew his intention, so he wanted to show this. And he created Adam alayhi salam, and then he told them to bow. And then here, Iblis refused, because he knew the significance of this bowing. That bowing wasn't because of worship. That bowing was to accept the authority of Adam alayhi salam over the jinns and over even the angels. Angels are great, but we are in one way greater than them, because angels don't have the ability to go against the will of Allah. They can't disobey Allah. It's in their nature to always obey Allah. But we have. So when we choose, obedience over disobedience, that is a far greater achievement than the angels who have no will to disobey God. Do you understand? That is why on the day of Arafah, there's a clear hadith in Muslim. Allah will boast to the angels and say, "Oh angels, inna Allaha yubahi bikumul malaika." Allah boasts to the angels and He says, "Oh my angels, look at my servants on the day of Arafah who have come to me with tatty hair and dusty clothes, disheveled to me. Look at them." Allah boasts to them because of the fact that we can disobey, but we choose to obey. And that's a higher rank. So Iblis saw this and he didn't bow, and therefore we know the clash that happened. He asked for extra time, he got that, and then he said, لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. He said, I'm not going to let this human being and all his progeny off. I'm going to take as many of them as I can to hellfire with me. And he said, I'm going to come in front of them, I'm going to come behind them, I'm going to come from the right side, I'm going to come from the left side. وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. Wallah, you will not find most of them to be, thankful to you. Now there's a key thing here that Allah said, and this is that key for our protection from them. He said, إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Iblis said, except for those of your servants that are going to be righteous, salihin. If there's righteousness, if there's good actions, then Shaytan has less influence because your immune system is strong and he has less influence over mankind. Now, he has this time that he's going to stay on the earth, and no other jinn has been given this time to stay on the earth forever. Until the day of judgment, no other jinn has been given that. Now, obviously, Iblis has his progeny. Iblis has his children. Iblis has his friends, and this is clear from the Holy Quran. In Surah Al-Kahf, in the 15th juz of the Quran, Surah number 18, verse number 50. Allah says, أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتَهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِن دُونِي وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ. Will you, O human beings, some of you human beings, take him and take his children? Allah says, ذُرِّيَّتَهُ, his children, his progeny, his grandchildren, his grandchildren's grandchildren, and so on. He's got a whole race of things that are being created on this earth, and so have we. So Allah says, will you take him and his family members as your allies, as your close ones besides me? وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ. While he is your enemy, will you do this? So this now, when Iblis came to the earth, now he's been looking for many ways to try and get the human beings to go to Jahannam. Now one of the ways is that he wants to influence the human being. To influence the human beings, he's got waswasa. That's been mentioned in the Holy Quran. In Surah An-Nas, the last surah of the Holy Quran, Allah has even given the name of the type of, because there are many types of shayateen. Many types of shayateen. There is one who's called Khannas, and that's the one that continuously whispers. And there's others, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has given a name of the one who gives doubts. There's one particular shaitan that will give doubts. So when people make wudu, some people get doubt. Did I wash this? No, let me wash it again. So they wash it again. And then after that, did I wash that little part of my elbow? No, let me wash it again. So they wash it again. This is doubt. This is doubt. And if you see any person who's in that, the best way is to get somebody who looks over them and tells them, just listen to me. Yes, you washed it. Now you just carry on. You washed it. Now just carry on. Finish it. Yeah? And so, it's some kind of disorder. If you don't get them out of it, they will literally spend an hour to do wudu. Or they could spend, they might do, I've seen serious cases where it gets to the stage where they've done wudu again and again and again and again, and forget it, man, the bathroom looks like a little pool by now. There's water all over it. And then they think, what's the point, man? Let me just jump in the bath. Seriously. And then they jump in the bath, and every time they want to have a wudu, they end up having a shower. And then they get waswasa in the shower. Oh my God, what's next, man? You're going to dive into the ocean or something to make sure that it gets really, it affects them quite badly. There are some people like a waswasa specifically regarding their salah. So, they get waswasa again and go, did I read this? And they want to start again, and they want to start again. Again, it's a waswasa. You just got to, sometimes you might, if you feel that it's happening to you, you just have to say to yourself, no, I did it, finish, khalas. I just did it. And just move on. Or you do it once and say, done, finished, and just move on. Do the next one. Don't allow it to continue, because the continuity of you, if you start accepting it, then it's going to change into a kind of disorder. Now, one thing is waswasa. Next thing is when he comes for waswasa into a house, because he comes to every single one of us, okay? Jinns have been in every single body, right? Are you scared of jinns, guys? No, you're not. You know why? Because jinns come in our bodies every single day. They do. Every single day jinns come. In fact, when you wake up for Fajr, you've got a jinn that's already tied, a shaitan that's already tied 3 knots over your head. Just over that part of your head. Tied 3 knots. Every human being, especially the ones that want to wake up for Fajr. There's a specific group of shaitans that are just after making us miss Fajr Salah. So if you missed your Fajr Salah this morning, you had a group of jinns that came to your house and they basically did their little job. So what they do is they tie 3 knots, and when you wake up, they say, Nam nam alayka laylin tawil. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this to us, in a hadith in Muslim, that you sleep, you've got a long night. And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said he'll carry on doing this until he's made you miss your fajr. He says, if the person gets up, فَذَكَرَ اللَّهِ, if the person remembers Allah, they say, Alhamdulillah, alladhi ahyani ba'da ma amatani. Whatever dua, whatever dhikr they do, any form of remembrance of Allah they do, 1 knot is untied immediately. Next one is they basically go and perform wudu. If they perform wudu, another knot is untied immediately. And one of the key things in the wudu that we do to try and get the influence of the shaitan away is to rinse the nose properly. Now a lot of people don't do this sunnah properly. When you rinse your nose, have you seen some people rinsing the nose with wudu? They just cut down and go. There's a bang there, nose 3 times with water. That's not rinsing your nose. Some people just get water and just go straight on top of their nose. That's not rinsing your nose. It's in the inside. Okay, so some people, what they do, their rinsing of the nose is just basically grab some water and just stick it up in there, stick it up in there, that's it, they rinse their nose. And some other people, they want to basically, do the classical one, yeah? You better not watch, brothers. Yeah? And then release some explosion from their nose. Yeah, be careful, brothers. There's other brothers doing wudu. Yeah, make sure he doesn't fall over him. He's got his clothes over there as well. I don't like. You're just trying to do wudu in the wudu area, right? You got some brothers who are trying to do wudu. I think, are you doing wudu or are you making me do wudu? Because it's half over your jubba, whatever, your trousers. Yeah, and when the guy basically does the classic one, you just basically want to make sure that he doesn't blow it all onto your clothes or something. So anyway. The sunnah regarding this, and it's very important because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that فَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانِ يَبِيتْ فِي خَيْشُومِ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the shaitan sits just at the end of your nostrils, within just your nose. He sits there throughout the night because you're in forgetfulness. You're not in a state of dhikr. And to get the influence of shaitan away is to take water to snuff your up to the bridge of the nose, and then to sniff it out, both sort of parts. So to take some water in is one sunnah, to take and blow the water out is the second sunnah. Both these sunnahs complete cleansing the nose at the time of wudu or ghusl, at the time of performing ablution or having a bath. So that's the second one. The third one the hadith says is that the person prays. When you pray 2 rakats, the last knot that is there will actually be untied. So jinn comes, and in a hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that each person has an angel and he has a shaitan that comes within him, and the angel will give good thoughts and the shaitan will give bad thoughts. Okay, that is there. Now we've got shaitan coming in, but the shaitan doesn't stay if you do the dhikr of Allah. If a person does the dhikr of Allah, the shaitan can't stay. It's a clear-cut matter. Hadith in Tirmidhi says that when the adhan is said, there's a very key thing to getting the shaitan away from yourself, or getting the shaitan away from a particular place, is adhan. The adhan, when the adhan is said, the shaitan feels as if his back is being broken. That's why he runs. When the adhan is said, the shaitan runs. When the Quran is being recited, the shaitan finds it very difficult to stay there. Now there are certain shayateen, certain devils that can slowly become immune to some of these things. But it's very, very difficult because what they do is they take the burning. They take the burning element and they withstand it, and they withstand it until they can possibly get used to it. It's almost like some human beings, you can start to play with fire and you can get used to touching fire. There's some people that can actually do that. So the same way they can actually get used to some of this. But it's very, very rare that they get used to being around you while you're giving the adhan, or being around you while you're reading the Quran. It is, or what they do is sometimes that if they've had a very long influence with a person, they can stay by far and still influence you from a distance. But that's a serious case. Now, doing the dhikr of Allah, reading the Quran, doing the adhan and so on, these things will immediately move the shayateen. Immediately move them away from yourself. When a person is not remembering Allah, the shaitan can come straight away. The shaitan can get to a stage where he can move around the body just like blood moves around the body. Blood circulates the body. And this is a hadith in Muslim where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna shaytan yajri fi ibni Adam ka majri dam." There can be a state where the shaitan or the devil can come within a human being and they can move around just as the blood circulates the whole body. When would that be? That would be when a person is in some serious ghafla, some serious, absence from Allah's dhikr, away from Allah's dhikr, or they've hardly got any of the deeni aspects within themselves. Now, I was saying earlier in the talk that there's two strengths that are fighting. There's two strengths that are fighting. Now here you've got to understand each body has got certain elements of the Quran in it. And there's nur, there's light that's spread when we read Quran. There's light, or the ruh, or the soul gets stronger when you do the dhikr of Allah. When you start thinking about Allah, when you start giving the adhan and so on, and when you start doing good deeds and good practice, there is a good strength to the body. There is darkness that spreads within the heart, within the body, when there's an absence of all of these things. So it's easier for the shayateen, for the devils to basically be there when there's darkness. Now, I'm using the word shayateen again, sometimes I'm using jinns. Now, jinns are every single one of these creatures Allah has created that we don't see, but Allah has made them mukallaf. Now, what does mukallaf mean? Mukallaf means Allah has given them the duty to follow the Quran and Sunnah. See, before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every prophet that came, the prophet's message was enough for their time. So Suleiman alayhi salam basically controlled the jinns. It came all the way up to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When it came to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his risala, when he got the Quran, that became the last moment that any jinn could comfortably go up. Any jinn could go up, go to space where the stars are, sit on the stars and listen to what is being said above the end of the universe where the angels are gossiping. The angels of the lower sky, they're always gossiping just above our universe. And just these are just above the stars in our galaxies that we see, right? The jinns could travel up to there and they could listen, bring information from there and bring it down. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to one hadith of Muslim, said that they would mix it up with 99 lies, one truth with 99 lies, and then say to certain soothsayers or human beings that had them possessed. A bit like what the tabloids do, right? Yeah, a bit like what the tabloids do. They mix a lot of lies with the truth and they say it. Now, what happened is there was a moment that they couldn't actually go up. They had fireballs, comets, flying or shooting stars thrown at them, and he used to burn them. This is in Surah Al-Safat, the 37th surah. You look at the beginning, you will find it. You look at Surah Jinn, you will also find the reference for it. It's the 72nd surah of the Quran. And then it became so difficult. Now they had a world conference of jinns where they got together and they started to say, okay, what is it that has happened on the earth for the reason that we can't go up? So here they said, let's scatter around the world. They scattered that and they said, we'll convene again and we'll meet again. And one group went north, one group went east, one south, one west, and so on. And one of the groups came into Makkah al-Mukarramah at Fajr time when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was standing in a valley leading the Fajr prayers, because those days it was very difficult. It was difficult. They could get tortured if they led the prayers inside the city. So they'd come outside the city and lead the Fajr prayers. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the valley in the darkness. He was leading the prayers, and the jinns came about and they started to listen to this Quran. Now this is in Surah Al-Jinn. You can find it in the 72nd surah of the Quran. You can also find this in Surah Al-Ahqaf, which is the 46th surah of the Quran. And Allah gives a whole reference to these jinns that came and they heard the Quran being recited from our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Verse number 27 onwards in Surah Ahqaf, the 46th surah. And they said, Quran and Ajab, and they said it's a very strange recitation that we've heard. And they were mesmerized by it. So they stood until Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finished. And then after the salah, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went and he met them. He gave them da'wah. They accepted. They say there was about 9 jinns in total. These were the first Sahaba jinn that accepted Islam. And then after that they went back, and it says in Surah Al-Ahqaf, it talks about how they went back and these were Jewish jinns, or jinns that were of the Jewish scripture. So they had not believed in any other scripture except now the Quran. So they gave da'wah, and now they had others joining in and coming to Makkah. And many of them would come to Makkah and visit the Prophet ﷺ. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has reported, this is the commentator on Sahih al-Bukhari, he has reported a hadith that says at times there would be up to 70,000 jinns coming to see the Prophet ﷺ. Just to see the Prophet ﷺ. So there was, just like so many thousands of human beings flocked to Medina to see the Prophet ﷺ, to Makkah, you had a lot of jinns throughout the whole of the world that came, they embraced Islam, they went back to their own sort of cities and their own worlds. Now, Prophet ﷺ, this was in his time. Thereafter, obviously, jinns, you've always had good jinns, you had bad jinns. Now this is again a reference in Surah Al-Jinn. In Surah Al-Jinn it says, minna salihun wa minna duna dhalik. We've had righteous jinns, and we had jinns that were other than that. We had jinns that were not righteous. So there's been the two, and the minnal muslimuna wa minnal qasitun. We've had jinns that have submitted to the will of Allah and become Muslims, and we've had jinns that have become disobedient or unjust jinns. There's both of them. The Quran in Surah Al-Jinn makes reference. Now, it's a beautiful surah. It's a short surah. If you get the time to read the tafsir of that surah, 72nd surah, please read it. There's a lot more information inside there about those jinns. Now, having those two different jinns, the good ones and the evil ones, you now can understand that in their world you've got everything that we have, they have. They came once to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his time, and Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu anhu was with him. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in an open field, open sort of space, and he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he drew a circle on the ground, and he said, Abdullah, he said, sit inside the circle, don't come out of the circle until I return back. And Abdullah bin Masud, in his hadith of Tirmidhi, he says that I saw in the distance long, tall, large creatures, that are see-through. They came down from the skies down to the earth. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the distance. He spent a long time there. Then he came back to me and he said that these were jinns that had come to me, and they have given me a kind of a complaint. They said that they want me to tell my ummah, my community of human beings, not to use bones. Now what happened in those days is that they used to go out in the wild to relieve themselves, and sometimes they would find, they couldn't find a smooth stone or something, or rock or whatever to clean themselves, so they would find a bone or something, and they would just use that smooth bone, they would use that to sort of cleanse themselves. Now the jinns complained to the Prophet ﷺ, they said, tell your ummah not to do this, because Allah puts rizq and our provision on these bones, and we eat after the human beings have finished with these bones. So sometimes you see, you've left a bag out there and you see a cat every single night, the same cat comes, and snarls and snarls wherever, and comes and eats from this little place wherever you put the bones, and just bites on bones. That is probably 99% a jinn. So be careful when you shoo it away, yeah, be careful. You might want to just give it another bone, empty bone, and say, go on, my little jinn friend, have that one as well, right? But don't sort of, beat away whatever, animal you see coming to some, specifically when they have bones, specifically when they're after bones. That is one of the signs that we know from the hadith that it could be a jinn that has come in the shape of a cat. Now they take forms. Now not all jinns can do this. Some jinns can do this. They can change into a snake. They can change into a cat. They can change into a dog. They can change, and that's why one of the reasons we know this is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came into Medina, he gave specific orders to kill black dogs. He gave orders to kill, dogs in general. He said, just get rid of some of these. And then when they lessened, he said, leave dogs alone. He said, Allah has created them just as He's created other creatures of His. They are a creation of God. Now leave them. He said, except for the black one. That's a Shaytan. He has mentioned to the extent of this. So Again, they can change into, no, we're not saying every single black dog is a shaitan, okay? This is just, we don't generalize like that. It means that some black dogs can actually be shayateen. You've got to understand the nature of hadith. When a hadith is said, sometimes when the Quran is speaking, they're not talking about every single part of the population. This is a big mistake people make. When the Quran says, innal yahud, when it says Jews, it doesn't mean every single Jews. The alif lam in al-yahud or an-nasara, it's talking about specific Jewish people, specific Christians. Just like sometimes when Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, He's not talking always to every single believer. He's talking to specific believers. That might have been in the Prophet ﷺ's time. Anyway, so we know that they have rizq from these. Now, their living places, generally they live where there's water, where there's caves, where there's inhabited places. There's trees, and so not every tree will have one, okay? So don't get hyped up about trees. I remember once I said some jinn stories, and there was a person who would just not go near trees, right? So we don't want to cause that kind of obsession or something. Now, they reside in places. Now, when they come in contact with the human beings, why is it then that sometimes they would want to influence a human being? Now, before I get into this, one important thing that I need to mention is some people just don't believe in this. Some people don't believe that a jinn can actually have an effect on a human being to the extent that they can take over their senses. They can take over the way they think. Some people don't believe that. Now, if you don't believe in it, I don't blame you, because you haven't seen it. You haven't been there. You need to be in the presence of these cases when these things happen. And all I will say to you is that if you can find someone who does exorcism, you just need to spend a few days with them, and then you will basically start seeing some of these things. And when you see quite a few cases, you then begin to start thinking, well, this is not something which is natural, normal. They can come in, yes, and they can break that barrier. As I said, they can break that barrier, come into a human being and take over the mind. They may sometimes take over the mind, sometimes they might not. Sometimes what happens is jinns may follow a person because they just like the person. Sometimes they follow a person, they like the person, and they like to do good things for that person. There's cases like that. I know a person who said to me that whenever it's Fajr time, they get woken up for Fajr by something. Yep, it happens. There's a person that regularly, whenever they're not waking for Fajr, there might be a jinn that might actually wake them up for Fajr, which is, alhamdulillah, a good thing. Sometimes, there's a good jinn in the house. They'll just stay there peacefully all their life, all your life. They won't bother you. And it's a good thing to have that good jinn in your house, because if it's a mu'min, if it's a believer, then you've got some good actions that have been done. Sometimes you're praying jama'ah in your place, or sometimes you're praying in your house, and they will come and sit next to you. These are good jinns. They will do that, and you don't need to be worried about that fact, because it's a good thing. In this masjid, every single masjid, there are many jinns that are coming every time they're praying with us. There's they will join with us in the safs. Sometimes when they can't join in, they might just join on our shoulders. They can stand on our shoulders, something they can join with us. They can sort of do sujood on our backs. They can do sujood behind us, whatever, behind the sufuf, whatever. They can join us basically in the salah. And there are many jinns that will join us on a regular basis, and they're good jinns. However, talking about those jinns, there are certain jinns that are there just for evil. Their nature is evil. So one of the ones that Rasulullah ﷺ has told us to be aware of are the ones that like to stay with impurity. They are known as the khubuth wal khaba'ith. The male jinns that are of impure nature and the female jinns of impure nature. Now they love toilets. They love, the thing that comes out your back. They love it. Seriously. And they love to mess around with it. And they'll have to stay wherever that is, because they just got this impure nature. Their name is khubuth wal khaba'ith. They're a particular impure part of the jinn colony. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us that when you go to the toilet, you just have to seek protection before you go in the toilet. So those jinns, if they're there, they won't have any effect. If they're there, it doesn't mean they're inside there. So oh my God, you sit in the toilet saying you forget your dua. Oh my God, I might be finished right now. No, you don't have to think like that. If you forget the dua, just say it in your mind. Just say it in your mind. So there's these impure natures. Now there's others who like. Now this is where impurity, as I said to you in the beginning of this talk, there's others that like to stay with human beings because they are impure, or they are stay in an unclean nature or a manner. And there's jinns. Now only impure jinns will stay with impure people if they are of that kind, and they will just stay with them. Sometimes they won't affect them, other times they might affect them. Now why do they affect? There are many reasons why, and most cases where they affect human beings is through sihr, through black magic. I'm going to come to that in a bit. But normally the jinns won't affect unless a human being has done something specifically to a jinn. If they've done something specifically to a jinn. And it's good when you're sort of walking, especially in dark places in the night, especially in uninhabited places, with a lot of forests and trees and so on. There's most likely going to be a lot of jinns there. It's a good thing to do is to read Ayatul Kursi. It's one of the best forms of protection from the jinn world. It's just to read Ayatul Kursi, and don't you think that a jinn can affect you if you've got your Iman high. Again, it depends on your immune system. If your immune system is good in terms of Iman, in terms of your willpower, you've read Ayatul Kursi, nothing should affect you. Nothing at all should affect you. You've got a strong will. Again, if you're a person who is weak and shows weakness, I've seen this, that sometimes there's a person who gets scared. Now, they like people who get scared because it's a target for them. It could be, there could be a case when they see that as a target. But if you read Ayatul Kursi, you shouldn't be affected. If you want to add on to that, read the Mu'awwadhatayn. Read Qul A'udhu Bil-Falaq, Qul A'udhu Bil-Falaq, and Qul A'udhu Bil-Nas. Read both these surahs 3 times, blow into your hands, and then pass them over your entire body. This is a general protection the Prophet ﷺ has given in several ahadith, and you read that and you are protected. Sometimes people are coming into a new place and they might feel uneasy in being in that new place. Again, if you read this, you should be alright. If you want to up that protection, then you add on to it, you can add on to it the beginning and the end of Surah Baqarah. It's a very powerful thing, the beginning and end of Surah Baqarah. So for example, from Alif Lam Mim all the way to وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, and from آمَنَ الرَّسُولُ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ رَبِّهِ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ, the end of Baqarah, all the way to the last 2 ayats of Baqarah. You read those, you blow into your hands, pass it over your body, it will be an extra protection. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that whichever house Surah Baqarah is being recited, the jinns or the bad jinns can't stay. This is a given sort of fact. So if you're scared about jinns being in your house or in a particular place, you need to start reciting Surah Baqarah, particularly in that place. And when we say Surah Baqarah, obviously the whole of Baqarah. But I'm saying when you're going to sleep or something, you can't read the whole Baqarah before you go to sleep. And you'll be there for about 5 hours, right? Or 3 hours, yeah? So that's what I'm saying. It's the beginning of Baqarah and the end of Baqarah is enough for you to read, blow onto yourself, and you've upped your immune system and your protection. Again, if you want to even make it higher, then you can read certain parts of the Quran. There are certain ayats that you can read. You can read any portion of the Quran, or you can read specific ones that are related to these sort of jinns and so on, where they will give you protection. Now, when it comes to the influence of the jinn on a human being, there are certain signs that you may see, right? And I'm going to give you one sort of incident now to make this more clear. And this is something that I've seen with my sort of own eyes. Okay, I've heard it with my own ears. Now, we were in a madrasa in Nottingham, in Flintham, in Newark. This was in the 90s. In a madrasa, and I'm sure if you sit with Maulana here, he's going to have plenty of jinn stories from his madrasa. And every other person that's been to some of these madaris, they've got some kind of jinn stories to tell you. Well, this one I witnessed, myself. We came to a building that was an old RAF building. Old RAF building that had been deserted for 20 years. So we were now coming into this, and we were going to start using this as a madrasa. Now when we came there, one of our teachers, Mullah Fadl Rahim, and he's still alive, he said to us, he said, because we started off living in one corner and we're going to slowly start using the rooms till the other side of the madrasa. Now this place had 120 rooms. Yeah. And it had about 3 different halls, massive. We had an east wing, a west wing, a middle sort of part. And we were in the east wing and we were just staying just in a few rooms. We're talking about literally about 7 or 8 rooms. And one of the friends and other teachers said, they said, don't go to the west side of the building. I'm telling you, you know, as young people, you dare yourselves, right? Yeah. So we said, come on, let's dare to go over there, right? So we were young. We went into the west side in broad daylight, 12 o'clock. I'm telling you, it was spooky at 12 o'clock. Forget 12 in the night. We're walking and we were holding our arms and we were walking together, about a good 7 or 8 of us. As we were walking, we can hear doors banging, bang, bang, creaking, things opening. You know, we just run. We were saying, you know, our kalimas loudly, shahadas loudly, what about that loudly, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, basically running, yeah? Now, you can imagine this place was really spooked up. And the teachers warned us, you know, don't go over there. Now, what happened is one of these sort of days. Now, there's this young kid. I'm not going to give you his name. He's probably grown up now. He's probably got kids now, all right? So I don't want to embarrass him when some of you might confront him. But he was from up north, from here, up north, and he was a kid, about 13 years old, I'd say, from Bangladesh. He didn't know a word of English. Forget anything else, right? He just knew Bengali. And he was the most quietest kid you can imagine. Just quiet, just sticks to himself and that's it. And he's trying to become a hafiz of the Quran and he only has done 1 juz. He's only done 1 juz. So one day what happens is that he sort of strays off. I don't know, he goes over to the other side and he comes back. And no one sort of takes much notice of it, but he comes back, and the evening when we're all sitting together and we're sort of reading, I wasn't there in the hall at that time, but there were others who said it. But then I went over to the hall to verify this. So this is something that I have verified myself. What happened is that he came with his Quran up to his teacher. You can imagine a kid who's lallu pattu, who doesn't know a single thing, yeah? He comes with the Quran to his teacher, puts it right in front of him, and he says to him, he says, test me. And he doesn't say in English, he says it in Arabic. And his kid suddenly knows Arabic, right? So he says, test me. And his teacher looks at him and he thinks, is he having a laugh? You know, those days, you know, the beats were a common thing, right? Thinking, shall I just make spaghetti out of him, you know, like, yeah? So this kid just seems to know, test me, any way you want, yeah? So the teacher says, okay, the Quran's closed. He said, okay, read from the 15th juz. Subhanalladhi asra bi abdi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawla. And the teacher looks at him and thinks, what is happening to this kid? So the teacher then tests him from another place, and this kid now knows the Quran, and the kid challenges the teacher in speaking Arabic. And this kid has got really good Arabic all of a sudden, right? And then, you know, when we heard this, we came over and I specifically went, you know, met him, and I started talking, and he started talking Arabic. Weird. So then we thought, okay, you know, whatever has happened, miracle of God, you know, and you wait. What happens is now this kid is acting really weird, because he goes and he gets a hair clipper and he shaves half of his head and he leaves the other half as it is. Takes his hat off, walks down the corridor with half of his hair on one side long and the other half is completely shaven. Now kids are freaking out. Jinn, 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 jinn. Right? So then, you know, the teacher grabs hold of him and says, well, you got to basically just shave the other half, so the shave the other half. So we've done that. Now, and he's acting all weird. He's doing things that, you know, sort of abnormal. So he then goes to bed, and okay, he's gone to bed. At about 2 in the night, all these kids, there's 6 to a room, and there's 3 bunk beds in every single room. So there's sort of 2 on every sort of bunk bed. 2 in the night, 5 of them from that room, from his room, come running down the corridor, yeah, banging on the principal's door, yeah. Jinn, 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 jinn. So the principal gets up, says, what's the matter? Jinn, 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 jinn. And the principal comes in, and there's only one kid sleeping. It's that one kid, the one that shaved his head, right? The one that knows Arabic all of a sudden now. Yeah, said, what's wrong? He said, nothing. So they go back. He said, go back. Puts the ball in bed, comes back. And he says, after a little while, these kids are screaming back again. Down the corridor, knocking on his door, jinn, jinn, jinn. So he said, what is it that was happening? They go, when we go into our bed places, yep. Imagine this guy's name is Imran. I'm just making it up. I'm not saying his real name, yeah? Imagine his name is Imran or something. They said that we hear all across the walls something dragging its nails or whatever it is and saying, so basically they just obviously leapt out of their beds, yeah, came straight to the principal. Now this went on all night, yeah, him taking them to their beds, then basically coming back. So then the morning came, and the main sort of teacher, Mullah Fadl Rahim Sahib, he called him over, and I was there serving breakfast. Now what's common is in exorcism is that you would recite something, and when you recite it, you're able to, when you recite something, some part of the Quran, then the jinn gets affected because they can't stand the Quran, and then they will actually leave, or they will beg to leave. In this case, this jinn was a believing jinn, and this jinn was a hafiz of the Quran, and this jinn knew Arabic. So when the teacher was reciting something on, and trying to recite something to blow on it, the jinn inside this human being was reciting the adverse ayah to break the effect of that. It was not any common jinn that was in here, and I'm sitting there watching this. So the Shaykh is reciting, and this jinn is undoing whatever recitation he's doing. And it was, the Shaykh said, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ فَتَنُوا الْمُؤْمِنَ وَالْمُسْلِمَانَ لَمْ يَتُوبُوا فَلَهُمْ عَذَابُ جَهَنَّمَ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابُ الْحَرِيقِ. And this other jinn from inside will recite something else. So it's undoing whatever the Shaykh was saying. So after a while, when the students sort of left the room, I asked the Shaykh confirmed that this is what he's doing. And then the Shaykh said that the only way to actually get rid of the influence is to take this young boy back to his hometown and to leave him there for 1 month. He said the reason why this has happened, and these guys, I'm saying this, that you won't believe in this unless you deal with this. There are certain things that you will not believe in unless you deal with it. So if you've got unbelief in anything I'm saying to you that I'm making Allah witness, whatever I saw, I'm just telling you. You just need to start witnessing some of this yourself, and you start believing in it. So the Shaykh himself was able to witness some jinns. And he witnessed a whole group and a family of jinns that had traveled from outside and stayed in that west wing for a month. And he had this feeling that they were there only for 1 month. So he said, if this young boy goes to his hometown, then whatever jinn is, he said there's a young jinn inside him who's a hafiz of the Quran. And if he stays in his hometown, the boy stays in his hometown, then the jinn will automatically leave because his family are leaving this west wing after a month. So we took him home, and as we were taking him, my God, I was sitting next to him on his left hand side in a car. He was right in the middle. He wanted to, he was going to open the door when we were going 70 miles an hour. He reached to open the back door, the car door. And the teacher stopped him, and the teacher gave him a good shouting. And then he basically stayed there until we got to the place. We left him in his home for 1 month. After 1 month, he came back, and he was the same docile kid you knew. Looked down while he walked. Never knew a word of English or Arabic, and only knew 1 juz of the Quran. Yep. Now why that happened possibly is because he went alone into their territory. Whatever happened, the jinn got some liking to him, and he basically took influence. And obviously he was a weak individual, so he took influence of this case. You've got several cases like this. I remember one case in Bangladesh. This I witnessed again. There was a woman who went, again Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said what? He said, Maghrib time comes, he said, don't send your children outside. When Maghrib time is, Maghrib is the time when the jinns are basically released. And specifically when they're shayateen and so on, and they're released, they might see something and they might want to sort of have an affection and have an effect. So there's a specific woman out there who went to the pond. It's quite dark sometimes out there under the trees. She got some water, came back, and she was influenced by a jinn. By night time, I got woken up. This was going back about 25 years ago. Right? By night time, I got woken up, and it was the whole neighborhood in this talking about something, and they got together. When I went to that place, I got woken up, went to that place. Believe it or not, I saw this with my own eyes, and you can see this, whether you want to believe or go there yourself someplace and see this. You had 7 men trying to pin down this one woman, and she basically lifted all of them up. And she said, who in the world are you lot? And there was this particular jinn was affecting one person in the neighborhood after another person, and they were all having similar patterns of behavior, which was first they would act a bit sort of dazed, dizzy, or they would act normal. Then they would start grunting, making funny sort of noises, and then they would basically have sometimes the saliva coming out of their mouths, and they would get knocked out. Sometimes they would bite on their tongues, and then after that they would wake up and they're not themselves. Now you're talking to them, they're not themselves. And they can talk to you in a different language from obviously the places they're coming from, and they can tell you of different things that this person doesn't even know. So you're talking to a different creature that is inside them. And obviously exorcism and so on, there was exorcism that was going on. And again with exorcism, don't try and become a person who's just going to suddenly become an exorcist. Bring the Quran and start going choo 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 choo, whatever, yeah, because you might get some jinn whacking you straight over the head and put you down on the floor and you never get up again. Yeah, I've seen it. This particular woman who was influenced, the following few days they got a person to do exorcism. This person wasn't a proper sheikh, so he came and he started to blow a few things, and this guy had a white beard. Yeah, this guy had a white beard, and he's right in front of my eyes. And he's an old man who tried to. The woman, with the jinn obviously inside her, grabbed his beard within a second and went slap, knocked him straight on the ground. Said, "Who are you?" Now, her husband obviously got really angry and started hitting her, but just slap straight. Said, "Who in the world are you? Who are you? What do you know?" Yeah, now it can happen, and there are some people I know who've gone into this exorcism and so on. It's not an easy willy-nilly thing that you can just take yourself in there and just become hocus pocus and you're a ghostbuster or something. Yeah, yeah? You can't just do this. It takes specific knowledge. It takes specific action. It takes a lot of amount of willpower and a lot of amount of things that you need to get into that. Now. Another individual I know, and I've been to this case where I've seen, because I get called to certain places, and sometimes I see the symptoms and I see that this must be a case of a jinn. One of the things that happens is that you get blackouts. One of the things that happens is that you get forgetfulness. Another thing that happens when a jinn is influenced you is that when you come out of it, when the person is out of it, they won't remember fully what happened when they were in that trance. It's very common when jinns affect the body. So that person that was affected, they won't know what they fully said. Sometimes they're able to recall a few words. And most of the time what these people said, because I've been to quite a few cases, I don't deal with this, please. I don't want you knocking on my door, yeah? Please, yeah? Got enough myself. No, well, I don't deal with this, and there's a reason why. Because number one, if you're good at it, then you're never gonna see the queue ending. And if you're bad at it, then the jinns are gonna just bust you up. I don't want to get bust up, right? Okay, so you got one or two cases, and I don't want to be in either of the case. But I do get called a lot of the time when there's incidents in houses, and then I've got to sort of go there and I've got to talk with the family. What I normally do is I refer them on to others. So I went to this one particular case. There was a young boy who was affected by a jinn, and he used to just come in and come out of this time, because the jinn was coming in and going out. And there's another sheikh doing the exorcism. And I'm telling you, one of the things you've got to look at is the strength. You've got to look at the strength of the jinns. Again, it's two forces. Strength of the jinn, and you've got to look at the strength of the exorcist as well. This particular exorcist, he claimed to be someone really good. And I love it when I hear it. Now, they give you the biggest stories they can. You know, I've dealt with this, and I've dealt with that, and I've dealt with this. And, you know, even, I remember one guy telling me once, he said, you know, even when police, they have got certain individuals that go in a bit hula baloos, yeah, they bring them to me and I read something on them and they get better and they walk away nice, yeah. You know, and that particular case, I heard that. This was in East London somewhere. This guy, I tell you, he couldn't do something. There was a case that I took to him, he couldn't deal with it. This other case I'm talking about, this was in East London, again somewhere sort of near Ilford. I went to this exorcist came, and I was called there specifically. I knew the family, so I sort of just was there to witness this. This guy gave the best stories he could. You know, you could hear, yeah. So he started his little, you know, hocus pocus, whatever. And after a little while, what you saw, this jinn was threatening him. The jinn was actually threatening and telling him. They said, you know, you watch out, you watch out. And he continued, because what happens is that when you sometimes you can trap the ways to trap the jinn inside the human body. And then if you start reading things upon them, they're going to feel that they're getting burned. They're absolutely getting burned. So what happened in this case is that it went on for a whole day, and I was there. That night, whatever happened, the next day we contacted the exorcist and we said, you know, come back again, because he needed to come back again to continue doing his, you know, reading. And he said, I'm not coming back. So why not coming back? He just gave some lame excuse. He's not coming back. So we contacted some other person who knows him, and we said, look, what's the reason why he's not coming back? He said, what happened is that night when he went, he got seriously attacked. There was not one jinn that was messing around with his body. There was 3 jinns. And they came and they gave him a good beating. I don't know what that beating was, but this guy didn't want to know us, see us, or hear of us again. Yeah? So you get these cases, but then you get other cases where there's good exorcists, and you know, they can recite. And the best thing to do in these cases is again to read the Holy Quran. Now, as I said to you, some people can read just Surah Fatiha. You know, some people, subhanallah, some people, they can just be coming and the jinn will ask to go. Now, my father used to actually do this when he was when he was you know, alive, right? He used to do it, and he told us once. He said he was coming to a house where the woman was sort of possessed. And again, look, guys, you want to believe in this, you believe in it. You don't want to, then just, you know, assalamu alaikum, yeah. But it's up to you. So my father told us this, that he said that he came to one house and there was a kind of person who was half learned, who was trying. You know what the jinn said to him? The jinn said to him, it was in a woman, and the woman speaking basically, the jinn's inside. The jinn said, "Hey, what's this you're blowing on me? What was you doing last night? I was watching you. Sitting around there, huh? What are you blowing on me for?" He's actually embarrassing him in front of the people. And then he said, let go of me, I'm going because someone's coming at the door and I don't want to be here while that person's there. And that was my father at the door. So when he came at the door, he entered the door, he came in, and they said, the jinn just left because you were coming in the presence, you were coming in this house. Now this could be the case where sometimes they actually do this. In my Shaykh's madrasa, you know, there's many stories obviously across the world, but particularly with my Shaykh, you know, I asked my Shaykh, and my Shaykh basically, if he doesn't even blow, he doesn't even read anything, he just basically just sits there, and if a person is affected by a jinn, he'll just say to you, say, "Oh, who are you?" He'll just say, "Who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here?" He'll straight up, he'll just say it. And the jinn that is with the person will start speaking. And this has happened on several different occasions. There are different sort of strengths and weaknesses, you know, with people, and it depends on what contact you come. And now I can go on and on with different sort of jinn cases, and whatever I sort of recall, I'll try and relate to you. One particular thing that I wanted to cover though is with the sihr, with black magic. What happens with black magic is that now black magic is haram. When a person commits that, they have to do it by going through something which is totally against the Sharia. Okay? And when they do it, what they're doing is they're influencing jinns, and they're bringing them and they're calling them to go out and to possess certain people, to be with them and to be over them and to take, to do certain things. So for example, one of the key things that in that part of Surah Baqarah that I mentioned was to split a husband and wife. To split a husband and wife. This is one sort of black magic the Quran speaks of. And I've been in London, there's one case that I was dealing with for 3 years. 3 years where we got, I got other sort of specific shuyukh to deal with this case. And there was sihr involved in this, and the whole thing was just done just to get the husband and wife separated from one another. And in the end, it actually just happened. But while it was, before they actually got separated, we managed to actually break the curse. We managed to break the sihr. And it was confirmed by 3 different shaykhs that I was dealing with at that time that it was broken. But there was also, sihr is a much more violent form of what the influence of what a jinn can do under his normal influence. Because sihr, there is real violence. Now, these jinns that come with sihr, they are jinns that are not of a good nature at all. They're not of a good nature. And what happens is that for human beings to gain contact with these jinns, the witchcraft that goes on, and there could be shirk involved in this, where people actually start to worship the devils, worship the shayateen. Now jinns are normal, but shayateen, obviously, they're the evil ones, they're the devils. So they will start either worshipping them, calling them, and there will be all sorts of impure things that they could put together. So sometimes, it's the blood of women's menses. Sometimes it's hair from one's private part. Sometimes it's, blood. Sometimes it's, dead animals. Sometimes it's graveyards. And whatever you can think of impurity. Sometimes it's fingernails. Sometimes it's people's hair. There's all sorts of witchcraft and black magic that can perform. But all of it ultimately starts off with very impure things that our Sharia tells us to stay away from or to get rid of. So with this, what happens, if anyone does this, out there, and there are people who do this out there. Recently, I think in the 1990s, there's a massive cult that started in Egypt where certain people from even the West were going over there. And there was a cult that started as devil worshippers. They would wear black and they would have long fingernails, or they would just stay with impurity, and they would worship these spirits, and they would worship sort of these creatures. And it came to an effect that the government had to ban this group. And some of them believed that with the pyramids and with other sort of things, there are certain shayateen that could get released. Whatever the belief was. But across the world, in Africa you've got this, in the Indian subcontinent you've got this, in this country as well you've got this. And mainly people who do this, they will call other jinns to come together, and then they will send them off to a particular house or to a particular person to just cause evil. Now with sihr, it is a much more severe case than jinns. And with this, what needs to be done is, again, Quran is actually enough. If a person does it, if the person's immune system is high, if they're reading the Quran properly, if they're doing the ibadat properly, then they can actually break it off. They can actually break it off. But if a person is weak, then they will obviously be affected by it, and there could be severe effect. Now the effect can go from one to another. It can actually sometimes lead to death. It can sometimes lead to death. Sometimes it could lead to a person being mentally, some of these mental patients, these mentally ill people you've got in hospitals. I would say to you a third of them perhaps, or maybe 20% of them might be sihr related or jinn related. Maybe 70 to 80% of them might have true mental cases, because that's another thing that you have to be aware of. There are medical reasons for some people to go mad. There are actual medical reasons. Unless you explore both sides, you won't find out. Now what happens normally is that when these cases come along to me, and someone says to me that someone has been affected in this way and so on for a long time, and they say that doctors don't know what's happening, and they've done this test and that test, and they've gone from this specialist to that specialist, And there's been so many, doctors that we referred to, and so many months and perhaps years sometimes has passed, but they still can't find the cause. Most cases, it's to do with sihr or jinns, when doctors can't find at all. But you need to go to the doctors. You can't ignore that side, because sometimes it's medical. Sometimes it could be, a nerve. It could be a medical condition. Sometimes it could be a psychological condition. And unless that is explored, you can't really find out. Now, most of the cases that I have coming to me, and I refer them on. Again, I'm saying I refer them on, is that I will ask that question. What have you done on the medical side? Have you actually explored that side yet or not? So then you send them off to someone. Now, if the case is positive, that they've got something, you normally find out straight away, because all you need to do is just sit there with a good shaykh, and when the shaykh starts to just recite, even sometimes they come near the shaykh, they'll start screaming, they'll start acting abnormal, or they'll start doing something sort of weird, or saying something, or they'll say, I'm not going. They'll just say, I'm not going. In strong cases, you want to take them somewhere. Even if you try and trick them, you won't be able to trick them, because they know what you're up to. So they won't even make a move to go to that place. And where they're doing the exorcism now, they will start with Quranic ayats. And again, as I said to you, the Quran is still enough as a ruqya, but it depends on the person who's reciting it. And sometimes what happens is that they're not able to accept with hours of recitation, or with multiple amounts of recitation. What I would say is, if you stick to the Quran, and I've seen this in many cases, if you stick to the Quran, you don't have to go to anything else to try and find the cure. There can be some severe, I've seen cases where I've been in close contact with one person who had sihr done on himself and his wife. And it was again to break them up. And they stayed on the Quran, and they were reciting it. The more, you really have to recite it and recite it and recite it. Alhamdulillah, eventually they're in a very good situation. Whereas one person who didn't recite it, they actually ended up committing suicide. Who was also affected, they ended up committing suicide. What I want to say is that it is enough. However, some people do resort to other things. Now, when people resort to other things other than ruqya, you've got to be careful. Sometimes people could then go to places or people that could turn to shirk or something that is wrong. And you've got to look at the people that they're going to, because there's all sorts of people, and some people are out there just to take your money. Some people are out there for a business. So they just want to make money out of you, and you've got to be careful. A lot of the cases that I've found is they're out there for ingenuine reasons. How do you know that someone's not ripping you off? Well, the first thing is that the person shouldn't ask money off you. That's one of the first signs I look for in a good shaykh, is that they shouldn't be asking money from you or fixing a price or doing something of that kind. Because when they do that, you know that that's not the first time they're going to ask for money. Yeah, you know these light bulbs that they created for years and years. Yeah, they deliberately used to make them so that after 4 months, after 6 months, the light bulb will go pop, and you have to go out back to the shop again to buy a new light bulb. They're stopping that now. But there's a whole few decades we've been buying light bulbs that could have lasted for 50 years, and they only made it last for maybe 50 weeks. Why? Because of money and business. So there's certain people out there who are out for your money. They're going to give you a ruqya that's going to only last you for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 4 months. They'll take a whole wadda of money off you, and then they know after 4 months you're going to come back again, and you're going to say, oh my God, he's come back. They're going to say all sorts of things. I had one case recently. It was really, I said, how can you believe in this person? They said, we took our sister to this person who's been affected. I said, what did the person say? They said the person, my sister had 900, my sister had about 996 jinns in her, and the sheikh beat out all of them except for 3. Yeah, and he's right down to 3. And I said, you're having a laugh. I said, the guy can beat up 993 jinns, and then he can't beat up 3. I said, what? Did you watch them all coming out? Boing, 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 boing. these people that give you these stories, there's this one jinn, you don't know what's happening, and they're taking money off you and saying things to you, all sorts of things, and you just been taken for a ride. Now, so one thing is that a good person will not ask for money. In fact, the real good people, now there's a second type of exorcist. He won't ask you for money, but if you don't give him money, he's not going to be happy. See, some people don't ask you money, but after a little while, you've been coming to them again and again, and then they're getting a bit annoyed. If you go give them a few pounds, £100, £200, then they get a bit happy again. They're getting a bit better again, and then the mood changes. You know that these guys, they really want your money. Now again, I don't like to entertain these people. There's a third type of person whom, if you were to force them to take the money, they wouldn't take it. If you force them to take the money, they wouldn't want to take it. These are the best ones you can find. They're not doing it for money. They're not doing it for money, right? And there was one, there's a group of people in East London, subhanAllah, some kind of Ghostbusters or what, right? They had a £45 call out. £45 call out. So basically you rang this number, it cost you £45 for them to come to your house. Then they started the little, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and then they'll stay for a few hours and then they went. If you want to call out the man again, £45 again. MashaAllah. And what they did in one case is, I'm telling you, this brother came to specifically North London and told me, he said, they paid him £45 and they came out for a call, and then basically this niece of his was bad, right? And she was screaming and saying all sorts of things and putting her hair and so on. And then what happened is, these hocus pocus lot came with £45 and they started to do the mantra. And after a little while, this girl was in full rage by 1 o'clock. She was like, you could say her temperature was 100. She was ready to sort of flip and sort of smash things. At that time they said, Astaghfirullah al-Azim, we're going now, we can't deal with it, we're walking out. I'm thinking, well, my God, you just started this thing, you've taken it, to a height, and now you're walking out. There are people like that will do that. So you've got to be sort of careful. Now, there are some other people who are close to these people who will not, even if you force them, they won't want to take money. But they genuinely, they might just take something, but they'll take it, unwillingly or something. Again, don't sort of question people always on their intention, as long as you're not being taken for a ride. So that's one thing you look. Second thing is, what are they actually using to do the exorcism? If it's the Holy Quran and they're reciting the Holy Quran, again, that's fine. If they're using other things, then you really got to be a bit careful in what they're using, because sometimes people can use things and they can draw things and they can burn things, and they can, sometimes in cases I've heard, they want you to start burying things in graveyards and taking candlelights and doing things with them. Now, these things, I'm telling you, if you start getting something weird that you know that this deen doesn't have, you just want to stop going to these people. If I could start having the questions coming into my